Hello friends, welcome back for another thought. First of all, I want to thank Dober Bernstein for putting this together, giving us the opportunity to be able to communicate. You know, they tell the story, of course, of Yankel, and he calls his rabbi one day and he says, "Rabbi, I can't take this anymore, I desperately need your advice." He says, "My wife and I are screaming at each other. She screams at me and I scream back, and the situation in the home is so tense. I don't know what to do." And the rabbi says, "Yankel, why don't you take a walk? Walk for 3 kilometers every day." Yankel says, "That's a great idea." About a month later, his rabbi calls him and he says, "Yankel, how are things going?" He says, "Rabbi, thank God, amazing." He says, "I'm about 90 kilometers from home now." Okay. They tell a story about a fellow, an older gentleman, who lived long, well, and healthy, and they asked him what's the secret to his longevity. And he pointed at his staff that he would carry with him, and in it there were 3 Hebrew letters that were engraved: Gimel, Zayin, and Yud. And they said, "Well, what does that stand for?" And he said, Gam ze ya'avor. This too shall pass. Never worry, never get entangled, notwithstanding all the difficult situations that we come across in our own lifetime. This too shall pass. Keep that in mind. And this is excellent advice, especially in our time of stress, our time of concern, and perhaps reading too much and listening too much to the news. But it's a real concern. But you know, Joseph too had his own difficult time, his own stresses for 22 years. He was imprisoned, he suffered by the hands of those who enslaved him. He was sold into slavery by his own brothers. And yet after 22 years, he suddenly says those famous words. He says, Ani Yosef. He reveals himself. He says, "I am Joseph, the ruler of entire Egypt. Ha'od avichai. Is my father still alive?" And he reveals himself to his brothers, and then they prepare to bring the wonderful news back to their father. He gives each of them gifts. Ule aviv shalach kazot. He then also prepares a gift for his father. Asara chamorim. 10 donkeys laden with gifts for his father. What were the gifts that he sent his father? Rashi brings 2 interpretations. The first interpretation, he tells us, was yayin yashan, old wine from Egypt. Why would Yosef send ancient wine from Egypt to his father in Israel? In our times, I'm not so sure that Egypt has a great reputation for wine. Maybe they do, I just don't know. But certainly Israel has some of the most amazing vineyards and wines that they produce. Why would Joseph send to his father living in Israel, choose to send him wine? And the Rebbe says there's a very strong message that Joseph was conveying to his father. He imagined what the scenario would look like when his brothers would arrive to their father at home. And they would say, "Oh, Yosef Chai," that Joseph is still alive. What the emotions that might happen in that house. Their father would automatically understand that they had lied to him over all these years, for 22 years. They would know that there was no Tarof Yosef. Yosef was not torn apart by an animal. He would discover that in fact they said, "L'chu v'nargeu," let's kill him. And then they settled on throwing him into a pit and finally selling him into slavery. This would dampen the excitement, the simcha, the special moment of being able to reunite with Joseph with absolute and full joy. And Joseph was concerned about this. And so he sent his father yayin yashan, old wine. Essentially the message he was sending his father was, "Father, I'm not sending you wine that I just got now. This is wine that I've put aside many years ago in anticipation of this moment of celebration. I knew throughout all the difficulties that there would come a time and I would be saved. I had no idea when it would happen and how it would happen, but I knew for certain that God had arranged this and that eventually my salvation and our unity would come to be. And so I set aside wine for this special occasion. You don't need to worry for me. I had absolute faith in God throughout the duration of this difficult time that Hashem would help. In this light, I want to share with you a story about a fellow whose name is Freddie Harger. Freddie lived in London. He was a successful diamond dealer. In fact, for a while, he was the head of the Diamond Exchange in Hatton Cross in London. And at one point, things were really difficult. The diamond business was slow, and he came to the Rebbe to ask for advice. And the Rebbe listened when he said that things are tough and business is really slow. And the Rebbe says to him, I hear from you all the negative. You know what you need? You need to be in contact with someone who's upbeat and someone who's positive. And he was taken aback because he'd never heard such advice. He flew back to London and he went back to the Diamond Exchange where he worked. And the very next day, William Goldberg from New York walks into the Diamond Exchange. William was always upbeat. In fact, he was too upbeat. He was always talking about his successes and bragging. And Freddie, by nature, had distanced himself. He had spoken to William, but never really had any close dealings. And this time, he remembered the Rebbe's advice. Associate with people who are upbeat and positive. And so he decided to go over to William and he asked him how he was doing. And they began a conversation and William said, you know, I'm in the mood of buying. Do you know any good deals? Freddie was well connected. And in fact, he was able to put together a special deal. At that time, it was an exceptional deal. It was about $100,000. And of course, Freddie made his own commission. But more importantly, Freddie and William became lifelong friends. Most days they spoke to each other every day and sometimes even more than once a day. This brought Freddie tremendous success by following the Rebbe's advice of associating with people that are upbeat, following positive news, looking for the best in every situation. I'd like to conclude what I heard just this week, and it's going around so you can check this online, the 5 tips that are presented by Nathan Sharansky. Nathan Sharansky is a famous refusenik who sat in prison for I think 10 years or 9 or 10 years. And amongst the time that he was there, about half of it, he sat in a punishment cell. And he gives some really good advice of how to cope with these times of quarantine. But one piece of advice that I'd like to share with you, and I quote from Nathan. Remember that you're not alone. We Jews for thousands of years all over the world were scattered, but we always had this feeling that we are part of a big people, a great people, with our mutual past, our mutual future, and our mutual mission. This is what will carry us through. Let us hope that soon together we will be able to say L'chaim together, to celebrate in person, not just via a video. Let's hope that this happens really soon. We're in the beginning of the month of Nisan, when we're told that just like the Exodus from Egypt happened in the month of Nisan, the future redemption with the coming of Mashiach too will happen in Nisan. Let this be. Amen. Stay safe.